I've recently been given a set of what appear to be drawing challenges for GraphPad, and I'm going to demonstrate how I would actually create these. Now, I have to start by saying that GraphPad was not designed to be an isometric drawing application. It's really for scale drawings, doing it, I guess, plan form, so you can lay things out and calculate areas and objects. But it still actually does fairly good, and I'm going to demonstrate how it works with these. Now, when drawing with a computer application, you're not going to draw the way you would draw freehand. You would use the capabilities of the software. And what I've done is I've actually created some portions of objects that you can then use to create composites. And so, for example, if we zoom in on this one particular portion of the drawing, I've created an object which looks very similar to it. What we could do is then just use that object to modify it. And you'll notice you can see the object that I'm going to be drawing in the background, and I'll explain how you can actually use that to your advantage. So you can kind of see how this would work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to regroup this item and then change the properties of that group so I can let's see, these and resize on, resize it a little bit. You can see you can actually kind of create it closer to the size of the entity. And I'm using the actual drawing as a backdrop for this. And then, for example, to create the other portions, what I could do is go to lines, grab this line here, calculate a midpoint, and then draw a line. And you'll notice that I'm not, let's back that out. We'll select that line again, create a midpoint, go to points, go to 10 degrees, and now I can actually draw this a little bit better. Okay, and then coming out in the other direction, you can see. So that can quickly create that entity, and then of course create text items on top of it. So for example, the 470 return, let's actually do that, and then grab it and change it to where it's 30 degrees. But again, 30, 0, return, and have it line up. Okay. Now you'll notice I've got that drawing in the background, and the way I accomplished that was by going to the second page and dropping the image on, and then changing the properties of the page itself so that zoom this page only, turn that off so it actually syncs up with other pages. And if I go back to the other page, what I did was I made the background of that transparent. So if I make it opaque, you'll see the difference, right? Or I can change it to where it's transparent. Let's see, background clear, and turn the zoom this page only off. And now the two pages will sync up, and so we can zoom them together. And so I can use this as a template to actually create my entities. Now some of the objects, and I'm going to still continue to use the background to help me with this. Make sure that I've got it at 10 degrees still, and draw my lines. And you can see that for something like this, it's actually relatively easy to create the object itself. I'm still going to use the midpoint calculation and then draw a line off of that, go across and across, and then come out in this direction. And I could, of course, apply the text. Well, notice we have this symbol here. I can go to my library. I've actually created that entity, and I can just tack that on top of the drawing. Okay, so that takes care of that one. If I go over to this object, well, that's the same as this one over here, so that's relatively easy to do. This object was a little more challenging. Again, we can actually start with just creating the entity by hand, and we'll see, can do that portion, right? Can now use our arcs. I'm going to put this, oops, sorry, one. We drop these arcs in at the corners. And let's go ahead and zoom in so we can see this a little bit better. And take out these lines. Line does not want to delete for some reason. There we go. That gives us a general shape. Can then copy that portion. Let's go ahead and group it first. Create a group. And then we'll go ahead and copy, paste that group. Okay. A little bit of a bug there. Well, you can see there are a couple of bugs with it. So anyway, go ahead and, rather than, since this is a demo, I'll just kind of work through the rest of the portion of it. So calculate a midpoint, go to my lines, go crossed, and then go crossed, etc. So that's an issue, that's a bug with the arcs not copying and pasting correctly, so that can be fixed. This one is a little bit more challenging, and I am actually going to create the Bezier curves by hand, just to show how that would work. So we can actually try and trace this out. Now we'll notice that it's not real close, and that's just because I'm not that good at drawing myself. So we can kind of scooch things around, excuse me, to where it's more lined up. Get that up. There we go. Actually get rid of this line here in the end. Try that again. There we go. Okay, and drag this point down. Maybe it's a little bit longer. It looks kind of like what we're looking for. I'm going to do again, we'll go ahead and create a group. Probably shouldn't delete the thing. Copy, paste that group in there. So I can kind of line it up the way we want. Now we don't need these extra lines, so what I can do is select those lines that we're not going to need and just delete those. Let's again, delete. Okay. And just kind of scooch this over so it's lined up. That's interesting. Wouldn't expect that to happen that way. Let's try this again. Alright, some issues here. Oh, that's why. That explains that. Now let's try this again. Okay, much better. And we'll grab this endpoint here. Scooch it over to where we think it's going to be, probably about like that. And draw our lines. And calculate a midpoint. Draw our line across. And align this direction. Are you not at 10 degrees again? You're not. Let's get rid of that. Points, 10 degrees, lines. Okay, whoops. Try this again. Much better. Okay, so I have a pretty good idea what that entity is going to look like. And that really shows how we can actually create isometric drawings. This is not one of GraphPad's strengths, to be perfectly honest, but if this is something that the client's looking for, then we can invest more into it and make a much better isometric drawing tool. And that just gives you an idea. Again, the more you can actually put things into a library in a format so that users are familiar with it, they can easily create these entities. I created all these entities just for this demo. They can create those for themselves, keep them in their own libraries, etc., to help them draw however they feel most comfortable. And that really is my presentation. Thanks.